Well, welcome everybody to episode 13 of the Real, Raw and Relevant Show with your host, Lockie. That is me. Honoured to have you joining us wherever you're joining us from, and it's really good no matter where you are that you're joining us. Hey, you might be wondering what we've got on this particular show. Two key things. First up, we've got the second of our What Is It Like interview series. It's a series we're doing where we're talking to some people with profile who are out there in the public sphere and asking questions to find out what it's really like being them. Not just what they believe or what they think, but just I'm trying my best to help you see that they are human and what they do and who they are and how we can possibly even relate to them. It's a heap of fun, and I've been pre-recording most of these videos so far, and tonight we have our next one, which is number 2, which is MP Louise Upston. She's my local MP, so that kind of helps, and so she graciously gave us some time, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that soon. And we're going to wrap up the show tonight with a little segment about two of the hottest words, I think, in the English language right now, especially in the Western world: misinformation and disinformation. They sound like they're married, or maybe they kind of are, but I'm looking forward to sharing some thoughts around that to help close out the show. Hey, if you like what we're doing here with the show, don't forget to always like, share, and comment. We appreciate the support that way. And if you're wondering how you can support the show, invite your friends, let people know that what's happening on the show. Maybe you're watching this live on Facebook right now. Share it onto your page if you like, and invite some other people to be part of the fun, part of what's going on tonight. And if you're wondering how you could support us, really simple. We have a thing set up called Buy Me a Coffee, which you can buy me a virtual coffee. It's buymeacoffee.com/Lockie, so Locky. I'll post a link to it later in the show, and you can buy me a virtual coffee. And if you know me or want to get to know me, you know that coffee is one of the many things that I really, really enjoy, apart from hanging out with you fantastic people. So enough of that little ramble at the start. See you soon. Well, as mentioned, we've got this great series that I've been enjoying doing where we're pre-recording, because it's not practical always to get people to do a live interview with me, much as that could be a heap of fun. And we may do that in the future. And we started off this series with talking with Bob McCoskrie. I always struggle to say his name, so I'm concentrating really hard there to say it. And tonight we're going to share an interview that I did. Actually, to be blunt, I filmed this or recorded this around Easter time with MP Louise Upston, and I really appreciated the time that she gave us. She did fulfill the brief that we gave her of being real, raw, and relevant. The interview goes for about 30 minutes, but I asked some questions that maybe you've been wanting to ask an MP and just haven't had the opportunity to do. I don't consider myself a journalist, but I'm a human being who loves asking questions. So strap in, enjoy this little interview we've got with MP Louise Upston, finding out what it's really like being an MP. Well, joining us now on the Real, Raw and Relevant Show, it's my extreme pleasure to introduce you to today's guest. We have Louise Upston, National MP for the Taupo Electorate, a role you've had since 2008. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
It's my great pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, we really appreciate you taking the time. So the reason why we wanted to talk to you, because we're doing a series on what's it like, and I wanted to talk to an MP, and I thought, well, I might as well talk to my local MP. You seem quite approachable, so it's a good place to start. And we're keen to help people find out what it's really like, you being you, and in the world that you're operating in, being obviously in a very public sphere. Now, before we talk about Louise now, we want to talk about Louise when you were younger. So what can you tell us about the younger Louise before you had aspirations for Parliament and all that stuff? Where did you grow up, and what was your childhood kind of like?
Yep, so I have to confess that I was made the decision I wanted to be a Member of Parliament when I was in primary school.
Wow, okay.
I wasn't raised in a political family. Fair to say we had lots of dinner table discussions and debates. The values that my parents raised me with were, very, very much, strong families, communities are an important part of the fabric of the country, so be part of your community. You should be rewarded if you work hard. And, basically a lot of the values that I bring to my work in each and every day were ones that I was brought up with. I was the youngest of four. Probably that meant I had to do quite a lot more to get my head above the others to be noticed. But yeah, very, very strong normal family upbringing.
Now, I obviously people like me who are trying to pretend we're sort of pseudo journalists these days do a little bit of research, and I found quite interesting. I read in Wikipedia, so you can tell me if it was a load of rubbish as well, that you dropped out of law school at 19 and you started your own management consultancy firm. When I saw that, I'm like, I got to ask you about that. How on earth can you tell us what happened, and how did you end up with fantastic clients like Air New Zealand, Russell McVeigh, and Datacom, and that sort of thing? I find it fascinating.
Yeah, so I went to law school, did law intermediate. That was, of course, the first step on my path, I thought at the time, to being a member of Parliament. And the first problem was I had a B plus average when I needed an A minus average, so I didn't get into law school. So I went back in my second year, and then after a very short illness, my mother passed away. So I was pretty lost that year, had a year where I was really unsure what to do. I'd been working in an office for several years doing secretarial work and bookkeeping and event management, that sort of thing. So I then decided I would start that as a business, and so started that at 19. And the event management side of it really is what connected me with some of those bigger companies, and providing services with another management consultant, which was, really exciting. But it exposed me to a lot in a short period of time.
And that's probably been quite foundational, I guess, for getting used to being in front of those types of people, especially in the world that you're in right now. You have to relate to everybody, don't you, doing what you do? And I guess it kind of leads to the obvious question. Like you mentioned that you wanted to be in Parliament from very young. How did you actually make that step from, obviously, you've got your own company, and into politics, and why did you choose the National Party? Out of all the options you had, well, there might not have been a lot back then, but why the National Party? How'd you get into politics?
Yeah, so not a straight path. The bit that most people don't sort of realise is that I was unexpectedly pregnant at 26. I was single by the time I discovered I was pregnant, so then had to make a decision about progressing a pregnancy as a single mum.
Okay.
So I spent a period of time on the DPB, which is what the sole parent benefit was called back then. And it was, very tough period of my life. And one of the things it taught me was that I actually wanted to be able to provide for my family and to be able to make choices for my own life. And so I started looking a bit more deeply about looking at the political scene. And a member of my family, when I decided to keep the baby, had basically said, "Oh, you can kiss goodbye any dream you had of ever being a member of Parliament."
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I've got a very stubborn gene, and I decided that actually no one could say that to me, and so it made me more determined. I didn't actually become a member of the National Party until about 21 years ago. And it's fair to say the values of the party are my values. And I think that's a really important part when people are deciding which party they fit with. And so my goal had always been to be in Parliament by the time I was 40, and made it at 37, despite a few hiccups and obstacles along the way.
Now, you've brought up something that's come across in some other interviews that we've been doing about you. Just you called it stubborn, but there just seems to be this, I don't even want to call it a personality trait, but just something about you that goes, okay, I've got this goal, I'm just going to do it anyway, even if I've got some obstacles. And so does that, obviously, I'm guessing it's obvious that it helps you being in the political sphere and dealing with all that comes with that, because I guess we see a lot in the media and what we might read in social media, but Is it even harder than we might expect operating in that world?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like anything, you have good days and bad days. I think, to be fair, the good days are amazing. They're absolutely extraordinary. You know, if you have helped a constituent during COVID, we had some of the most challenging cases we ever had to deal with. And being able to, for example, get an MIQ slot for someone who wasn't sort of meeting the rules, and to get an exemption so they were able to return to New Zealand to see a loved one. Those are the days that the job is incredibly rewarding. There are days that are not so rewarding, and I have to just remember that people might not and often don't agree with the decisions we make as politicians. But I would always like to think that because I'm listening, I'm accessible, I work hard, and I try to represent the broad population across the Taupo electorate, that people will at least respect me for the work I do and the decisions I make on their behalf. And like everybody over the last couple of years, being in the job I'm in has probably been some of the lowest points that I have experienced. But, you know, it's not every day. And every job you get some of those days, and you pick yourself up, you dust yourself down, and remember what is the key thing I'm there for. And it's about improving the quality of people's lives. And that is an extraordinary privilege to be able to do that. And I've just got to keep remembering that's the outcome. That's what I went into this job for. And a few rough days will come and go, and they'll pass quickly.
So you've mentioned rough days. If you had to pick your favourite, or the thing you like the most about the role you're in, what would be that one thing you really enjoy about being an MP?
Well, I had a day yesterday, for example, with my youth advisory board, a group of, between 30 and 40 extraordinary young people, and we were talking about the issues that matter to them. And it was an opportunity for me to be able to talk to them about they don't have to be passive. So often young people say, oh, I won't bother voting because one vote doesn't count. Well, actually, there's lots of things you can do as a person to be active, whether it's signing petitions, whether it's writing to an MP, whether it's getting involved in a particular issue. And they were so motivated and so pumped by the end of the day. So I had influenced a group of people so they know their voice counts, and there's simple actions they can take on to progress issues that matter to them. So it was really exciting.
It's one of the things I've had some personal engagement through one of my children, who has shared his extreme aspiration of being in Parliament one day, and he has his plan that he's got in front of him. But one of the things that I've noticed about his journey towards that is he got exposed to local MPs like yourself. He met the Prime Minister when the Prime Minister was coming through town for some other engagement that he was involved in. It really has an impact, that breaking that barrier between an MP sitting in potentially Parliament, which you're not sitting in Parliament all the time, obviously, and people in the community. And there is that gap. People think you're this person who's out there and distant, but I've seen for yourself, and this is not just to blow smoke, you get engaged and turn up to community events. And I remember meeting you for the first time actually at the Great Lakes Centre here in Taupo when you were hobbling around, I think, in a moon boot or something after some netball accident. Yeah, even though you're injured, you're out there engaging with people. And would that be fair to say that's something that you enjoy doing? You like being able to connect with people? You don't want to hide away in an office and have advisors tell you how to speak to everybody?
Oh, absolutely. And, so I've got a couple of physical offices, one in Cambridge and one in Taupo. But, if I'm sitting in my office, I'm not doing my job. My job is with people, listening to people. Unless I hear from people what their views and perspectives are, I can't represent you in Parliament. And it's just amazing because you get to look under the hood of lots of different organisations, meet incredibly inspiring people every day that are just doing things quietly in the background that most people in the community don't realise. So it's really exciting to be able to meet those sorts of people, connect with them, and to take their voices and their concerns to Parliament. So yeah, that is the part of the job I absolutely love, whether it's, meeting people who are passionate about the environment, like kids greening taupo, whether it's people who work in social services, whether it's business people who are starting a business and hitting some of the hurdles that I hit when I was in business, teachers who do an extraordinary job. Look, it's just endless, but we have amazing people in our community, and in the job of being an MP, I'm fortunate probably to meet more of those sorts of people than many would.
Okay. Now, a couple of, hopefully they don't get sound too sort of tricky questions. From what I've seen of your voting record, because that's important, and many of us take notice of that, you tend to be on the side of the least popular, I suppose, in culture right now. How is that for you? Do you feel comfortable doing that? Is that something you feel uncomfortable that people know about? I hope that's not a tricky question to answer. I just find I'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts around, your voting record and how you position yourself and how that works for you.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've always said with conscience votes is I will seek the views of the communities I represent. I do my own homework. I meet with those who are for the particular issue as well as against the issue.
Okay.
I do independent research, but at the end of the day, I will cast a vote based on my conscience. And that's what I'm in Parliament to do. And so, yes, on most of or many of the votes, I've not been on the most popular side. But it's really important to me that I'm true to myself and I make it known to people what that is. I'm very respectful, and I attempt to be as informed as possible. But what I want to make sure I do is consider who is the most vulnerable or who is the most at risk in this issue. And so, take one example, the abortion legislation. I was in favour of it coming out of the Crimes Act, but I was really concerned about abortions taking place, particularly over 20 weeks. And I have personal experience of that. When I said before I was pregnant at 26, I was told by doctors I should have a termination on medical grounds, and that termination could occur up to 24 weeks.
Okay.
And got lots of advice, did all of the counselling. At the end of the day, it was my decision to make, and I made the decision to proceed with the pregnancy. I have a very strong, healthy, 6'5", gorgeous young man as my son.
Fantastic.
And so, I bring myself to work, warts and all, so to speak. But actually, I think that's what people want in Parliament. They want real people with real experiences who are willing to bring that to work. And not just be seeking the popular vote or the popular answer. And I'd like to think that the people I represent respect me for that.
Now, I'm really appreciating you being so raw and relevant, you're sharing personally, which is what I was really hoping we might be able to do, because otherwise it seems a bit silly talking to you about being an MP and just following political lines. You mentioned about staying real to yourself, and obviously you've earlier referenced values. That's something obviously you've carried over into your role. And do you think that type of approach is across the board for all MPs, or do you think that's got less and less as times go by, as people feel pressured by populist politics and party lines and all those things that come in ebbs and flows over time? Do you think that's shifted in any way in the last sort of 10, 20 years?
Well, I think with particularly with the advent of social media, the criticism is much stronger, far more intense, and so it would be easier just to kind of go with the mass position. But I, as I said, I need to be able to, sleep easy with my conscience and cast my vote the way I believe, and that's, I was raised a Presbyterian, so it's fair to say I live by Christian values. I don't go to church regularly, but I consider myself a spiritual person, and so actually, listening to myself and deeply contemplating before I make these decisions is part of the process I go through. And yep, you in this role, you're going to get criticised, and there'll be lots of people who don't agree with you. But as I say, as long as people understand a bit more about how I've reached that decision and that I have listened and I've deeply considered the issues, I don't go into anything with my shutters on or blinkers on, and I will consider. So the issue that more recently the conversion therapy bill.
Okay, yeah,
so the name of the legislation. Yeah, so the name of the legislation is, banning conversion therapy, which on the surface of it makes sense. Then you look at the detail of the bill, which is my job as a Member of Parliament, and I was really concerned about the potential criminalisation of parents engaging in conversations with their children, with the view to ensuring that it was an open discussion and views could be expressed without a child or a parent being criminalised in that. And so I voted against it in the first and second reading. And then I listened very carefully to the debate, the questions that were put to the minister. The minister put on record in the House that parents could not be criminalised. And so, although not all of my concerns were addressed on balance, I was then in a position to support the bill at the third reading.
Okay.
Can I say that the level of the just the absolute vile commentary and attacks on social media that extended not just to me but my family is one of the low lights of my career to date, and I think that's where unfortunately some people will be put off coming into this public service because of that sort of thing, and I would like to see that stop.
Yeah, so before we started our interview, I told you a little bit about my background, and I've been brought up around politics all my life. Now, my family obviously had very strong leanings in a certain direction, but that doesn't mean we weren't able to talk about it as I've gone through life. I still remember who I voted for in the first election, and it didn't follow my family's party lines, because I was a silly little 18-year-old who just thought it was funny to vote and excited, and I voted for McGillicuddy Serious. And half the people in the world right now will have no idea what I'm even talking about. But before the days of MMP, we had National and Labour, Social Credit. You'll remember them, and a couple of other parties that got thrown in that never went anywhere. They're kind of like a protest vote or a fun vote. But we had this ebbs and flows of we went left of centre, right of centre, left of centre. It would go backwards and forwards. And over time, I looked at it and went, well, we sort of end up still centre. No matter what happens, we go backwards and forwards. Do you think we're heading off in any other directions right now? Do you think there's pressure pulling us? Commentary I read feels we're heading off in a certain direction. Would that be a fair concern for some people to have?
Look, I think the main thing is that it has been more challenging in recent times for people to openly express their views and opinions, and that really worries me. So no matter what your view is and your opinion is, you should be free to share that and explore it. And if we don't have open discussion and debate, I think the risk is there will be people who are uninformed, making decisions because they're uninformed about an issue and are swayed by certain influences, as opposed to really being able to discuss, debate, and reach a conclusion themselves. And that's a worrying point at the moment, that I think fewer people feel confident about topics that are perhaps controversial or unpopular, you're entitled to hold a view. You know, others will not agree with you, and that's fine, but you should still be able to express it.
Yeah, when we've put out at different times since we've started the show, what do people want us to talk about on the show? Since we've called it Real, Raw and Relevant, people don't ask me to talk about simple things. They've asked us to do discussions on the most tricky, nuanced conversations. People want me to talk about the treaty. People want me to talk about vaccines and all that stuff. And to be blunt, I've steered away from it because I'm just so nervous about putting myself out even I'm not a big commentator, I'm not big in the sphere, but you realise you don't want to stick your head out a little bit too much in New Zealand in regards to politics. That's why I think, for me, and this is not just about you, but I have full respect for people like yourselves who are actually wanting to be an MP in this environment. I think it's very, very tricky, so thank you for doing that. Now, I've got a couple of other quick questions. I don't know whether you want to answer this, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. What's it like debating the Prime Minister in Parliament? Have you opportunity to do that?
So my portfolio that I've picked up is child poverty reduction. So I haven't asked her a question on that yet, but definitely have followed in general debate. And look, she's a person like anyone else, and she, in the role she has, it's our job as opposition to hold her to account. I don't think she's delivered for New Zealanders on child poverty. And that is an issue that all New Zealanders that I've come across are concerned about. And I will absolutely be holding her to account for that.
Now, that's part of the thing that I think I wanted to get out there, and I've got some other plans coming up on helping people to understand our system, because we have this, am I getting this right, the Westminster system, or whatever we call it, for Parliament, where we actually have a party or a group that leads Parliament, and you have an opposition. And it's what you've alluded to. The opposition are there to keep the Parliament, hold them to account. That's a phrase we get here a lot. And I'm wondering whether there's a lot of people in society now who just don't actually understand the system that we have. It's you're either right or you're wrong, or left or you're right. I find that very, very tricky. So I'd encourage you to keep explaining what you do to people the way you're doing it. I think it's very, very, very helpful. Now, finally, wrapping this all up, because we've gone way over time and I appreciate all the time you've given us. What do you do to look after yourself? Is there something you do to look after yourself emotionally, spiritually, physically, especially in this public sphere role that you have? How do you look after yourself so you just don't lose your marbles or want to hide in a corner or hide under your desk at the end of the day? What do you do to look after yourself?
Well, there's a couple of things. Obviously, this morning I've been out for a walk along the river with my daughter, who's back from university for semester break. So
nice.
Getting outdoors, getting in nature, exercising, spending time with family. We're really fortunate. We've got 10 acres. We've got rescue chickens, and I've got 3 adorable sheep. And we have a very big garden that I try to keep under control. We've got some native bush that we're trying to regenerate. So we'll be out there getting thistles or chopping gorse. So you name it, I'm doing it. And it's those things that keep me grounded, spending time with my family, spending time in nature, and just actually, very real and normal things. Probably I would like to spend more time doing it, but I just love those very normal things at home. With the people I love and in an environment that is very peaceful and calming.
Fantastic. Hey, look, thank you so much for your valuable time. I really appreciate you taking time to talk to us today.
Been my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, you could be forgiven for thinking that the most popular words in the English language right now are misinformation and disinformation. I mean, I hear them every single day. And I bet you do as well. They litter the media landscape, and politicians seem enamored with them as well. It doesn't matter where I'm watching in the world, there's always a politician talking about that naughty misinformation and disinformation. And maybe you've been wondering what all this fuss is all about and why these two words seem to cover every single story from every single angle, why they seemed linked when are they possibly the same, and why are they used in tandem and to seemingly, I think sometimes used to stress the point when someone's trying to get their point across that someone else is wrong, they just say misinformation, disinformation. It's the married couple of retort. So you might be wondering what they mean. So I thought let's just help us out a little bit here. So here's the definition of misinformation from dictionary.com. I don't want to say that I came up with this, but that says it's a noun. You can find out how to say it properly with the fun little thing on the screen. But it simply means false information that is spread regardless of whether there is intent to mislead. I thought that was a good definition. And here's disinformation. False information is about a country's military strength or plans disseminated by a government or intelligence agency in a hostile act of tactical political subversion. So it sounds a bit more of a ramp up, doesn't it, from misinformation? Second definition, deliberately misleading or biased information, manipulated narrative or facts, propaganda. So there you go. There's some definitions of those two words. And I think it's interesting to look at it because people throw them out there in the sphere so much. In fact, dictionary.com goes on to explain that disinformation refers to false information that's spread with a specific intent of misleading or deceiving people. And misinformation more generally refers to false information, whether or not it's intended to mislead or deceive people. Now, I love those explanations. And one way that they explain on dictionary.com, which really helped me to understand this, I think, is the difference between them is disinformation is not just false, but dishonest, while misinformation can be a mistake. Maybe that's a way to look at it. The interesting thing with the meaning of words, and I love talking about the meaning of words, is because in our culture right now, we just throw words. In fact, one of my favorite sayings that makes my wife laugh, and I keep using it because if I can make my wife laugh with me instead of at me, I'm all for it. But the word salad that goes on with politicians and different people in the public sphere at the moment, it's just crazy. And so I think it's important that us as the public, average Joe out there who actually has a say in our world as well, we understand why those words are getting thrown around. You might have actually seen in America right now, there's a new initiative that the Biden administration has come up with. Actually, it's part of the Homeland Security Department. The boss of that is the guy you can see in the right-hand side bottom corner of your screen. And they've created this thing called the Disinformation Governance Board. It's causing quite a stir, and you might be thinking, whoa, what does that mean? Are they going to create disinformation? Obviously, what they're talking about is stopping disinformation. I think I've got a bit of a... You can check this out. Here's their website. Well, the website at dhs.gov talks a little bit of a fact sheet about that. You can find out a little bit more about what's going on there as well. But the thing that I'm reading about and seeing commentary on from both sides of the aisle is that there are people wanting to combat this thing called misinformation and disinformation. And these guys, DHS, are framing it around they're going to stop disinformation in regards to foreign entities, when the reality we all know is that when someone disagrees with you at the moment, they throw this phrase at you. It's just misinformation. It's just disinformation. And the concern is that many are equating that this organisation could be something akin to George Orwell's Ministry of Truth from his book 1984. Look, time will tell. I don't know. But I personally have some concerns, especially when you look at the published bias of those involved. I'll just check their little pickup on the screen again. They're not exactly people who have centrist positions on anything political. They're very strong, anti the Republicans in America. I'm not sure if this board is really the right move, but that's the choice they made. And something else just to get you thinking about this whole disinformation, misinformation, I'll grab this short clip from my mate Bob and let him explain it a little bit better than I am right now.
I mean, that's the question, isn't it? Who gets to determine what is misinformation? Because the media use it, but it seems to be just a term for a viewpoint that they don't like. And it came up with the Joe Rogan issue. You may have heard of Joe Rogan, a very popular broadcaster in the United States. He's on Spotify, a big contract, massive listening audience, and the left are trying to cancel him because they think he promotes misinformation, especially around the COVID issue. And his response was this. He says, the problem I have with the term misinformation, especially today, is that many of the things that we thought of as misinformation just a short while ago are now accepted as fact. He said 8 months ago, if you said if you get vaccinated, you can still catch COVID and you can still spread COVID, you will be removed from social media. Now that's accepted as fact. If you said, I don't think cloth masks work, you would be banned from social media. Now that's openly and repeatedly stated on CNN. If you said, I think it's possible that COVID-19 came from a lab, you would have been banned from many social media platforms. Now that's on the cover of Newsweek. The science does change. Our understanding of science can change. And so debates need to happen, and we need to have these robust debates.
I love what he actually says there about having robust debate. It's something I shared the other week about truth. Truth is never scared. And it seems to me there is this battle for truth at the moment. Everyone thinks they've got a corner of it or ownership of it or a handle of it better than everybody else. And the battle seems to really be heating up. Can I encourage you to be a little bit curious and not just cynical? And the reason why I say that is because I would encourage you to engage in the debate. And I'm not meaning on the front foot necessarily getting online and screaming and yelling at everybody. I'm not talking about that debate. But look at what's going on. Do some research, do some study, run it past somebody else, what you're learning that even might argue with you, to challenge you, because that's actually part of how we grow up, have the debate. Look, there's fake news all over the place, and it can come from any source. From anywhere, from the most powerful person in the world through to your next door neighbor who's got the wrong end of the stick. Now, just because someone says something is misinformation or disinformation doesn't mean that it is. As Bob said, it's this phrase that gets thrown around when you don't agree with someone. Sometimes it's the coward's way of not having to answer to a legitimate question or concern. You might think I'm being a little bit strong, but I think the meaning of words are important. And so if someone is arguing with you and all they do is yell back at you misinformation, disinformation without an argument, just know in your own heart they don't actually have an answer. And I think it's always okay to ask questions because the truth is never afraid of them. It's just something to think about as we wrap up the show. Hey, thank you so much for joining us for episode 13. If you'd like to make contact with us, we'll put their email address that will go direct to me up in the credits at the end of the show. We hope this has made a measure of difference in your life. Hope you enjoyed our interview with Louise Upston. Thank you, Louise, for your time once again. Hey, look after yourselves and see you again real soon.